Did you go to the golf cart parade?
No.
No.
Desiree.
Too much traffic.
Desiree was having a blast.
I got blasted.
She got blasted.
So,
When you,
by a certain council member.
well, when you put all those rules on it, like,
You all are
what
live.
fun is it?
Thank you.
You used to always go, right? Yeah.
Until then.
All right, good morning. This is Public Services and Facilities Committee, July 9th, 9 a.m. I would like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public have been duly notified in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Citizens' comments. Do we have any citizens' comments?
Not that I've been told.
No citizens' comments. Approval of the previous meeting minutes from June 4th. Any-
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Excuse me.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so old business, discussion of the City Hall building assessment, renovation and expansion.
So just for context, at the last committee meeting, we heard from Trident and MPS about the first phase of the work for the city, looking at the current condition of the City Hall building and looking at options for us to renovate, expand, and relocate. Of that discussion, there was a request from the committee for Trident to go back and look at 2 additional options for a relocation. Those were combining with or consolidating with the existing public safety building and also looking at Lot B, which is another area, lot that the city owns for a potential new building. Council considered a change to their proposal to expand the scope to look at those locations. That was approved last month, and now Trident and MPS are here to present some preliminary findings of that exercise. John, do you want to take it?
Take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank y'all for having us back. And we've got MPS, Brian, Michelle, and Lauren here, and also Seaman Whiteside, Brian, and Whitner. So thank y'all. They've done a ton of work and a ton of investigation on this that we're about to go through and show you here. And what we've done is put together kind of 4 potential options just as a starting point. And what I'd like to try and do is to show you all 4 of them first. And then we can come back and talk about the pros and cons of each, just so we don't get bogged down on one without seeing all the other ones. So if y'all are good with that, we can flip through. I'll click through the PowerPoint. Might just, there we go, something scrolling.
I don't need pictures charged, but I'll flip, you just want me to flip up.
Okay. Okay, yeah, if you could just go to the next.
Yeah, just for context, we want to make sure everyone's aware of the 2 sites we're looking at. So the first one is Lot B. It has some deed restrictions on it that it's intended to be used for recreation, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it is adjacent to the public safety building, which is one of its assets, or it could also be an option to anchor Ocean Boulevard and kind of fill in that missing, one of the rare kind of missing lots on that street frontage. Next, please. The other site is the public safety building site. We would propose to put an addition onto this site. Parking is a bit of a challenge here. But we'll show you some options to add on this site. So quickly, what we're going to show you today is not a design. You have to look at these as more of diagrams or proof of concept. So don't get caught up in the imagery or the layouts of the spaces. It's more of a proof that the spaces can fit, and this is a general impression of what it may look like. So we're going to show you two versions. One where we fully attach to the existing public safety building. Another one where we only partially attach to it, where we keep our connections to a minimum. And then on the Lot B, one would be a new freestanding building on the rear of the site. This is with a potential parking garage to offset the requirements for the deed restrictions. And another would be a building on the corner of Ocean Boulevard with or without a parking garage attached or adjacent to it to create that street frontage. So those are kind of the high-level things we want to show today. So two options on each site. I can kind of back up and get kind of neat, more in-depth with each one of those. So the first option, one of the challenges with attaching to the building at multiple points is
It's just a coordination constructionally, right?
Yeah.
We're tying into an existing building, and it's going to be disruptive to the current occupants, but it's definitely doable. And then tying into the existing roof lines is a challenge too, which you can see MPS kind of tied that all together and rearranged that here.
So the cost of adding on the public safety building is more than a freestanding building, because there would be work to modify the existing building, to attach to it, both on the exterior roof lines and some of those other connections, but also from a floor plan side. What we would propose, so if you go in the building now, there isn't really a welcoming feel to it, because most of the functions are on the upper levels. You really arrive into a corridor. So one of the pieces of feedback we heard on this building is we have a similar challenge here. From a public's perception of arrival, it's lacking. So we would want to do something to address that here. We don't want to recreate the same challenge we had in this building. So in order to do that, most likely what you'd have to do would be to move some of the bathrooms that are at the front north side of the building. On the upper level, the EOC building, or EOC room would have to be relocated to allow for a connection at the second floor. So those are some costs that aren't currently captured in the previous Trident budget for an existing building.
And what that connection allows us to do is to use that one existing elevator. We could look at adding another elevator or doing some other stuff if we didn't want to have a connection, but that kind of defeats the purpose of attaching to it if there's no, if you're not tied together. And so please ask any questions as we go through this too.
Or we'll go more in depth in the other ones if you want to wait.
This doesn't sound like a great option, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so the next one where
Okay.
where they're next to each other but not that one.
The option where the fewer points we actually touch the building, the more cost effective it's going to be. The other plus of it, these windows are all placeholders, but you have more sides for windows. One of the comments we received on this building is that there's a need for many private offices. The city's workflow doesn't work well with a lot of open office spaces. So the more exterior wall you have, the more easily it is for us to accommodate offices for windows for the city staff. So this increases that greatly. It also means that the fire department and the police department do not lose any windows too. They have the fire department has that nice balcony up there where they need to use that time to decompress and relax. There's a few windows out of the police station. In both schemes though, the drive-through apparatus bay for the fire department would be lost. So all the trucks would have to back in.
They're one small portal they're using mostly for the Sea-Doos and jet skis.
And that will be lost also?
Just the back overhead door.
And do they need that?
I don't think they use it frequently.
Got a question for Chief to see what the disruption would be?
Right,
Have
but
we
that
talked
would
to
be,
them?
Not, we're seeing this now, so we
Okay.
haven't talked about, once we start narrowing it down with options, we'll look at it. We did talk to both chiefs about this, the idea conceptually, but we haven't shown any of these concepts to them. The drive-in bay is certainly a convenience. It's not a need, the way we see it. A lot of fire stations don't have it. It's not used for the large apparatus. It's just used for the Sea-Doos to come in and out and accessing the parking lot. So it's convenient. If you're in the bay, you can go, into the back parking lot currently. But if there's no parking lot in the back, I think that could be solvable.
It's not like an emergency situation
No.
that we'd be messing up.
We don't believe so.
So this eliminates the integration challenge, it eliminates the roof line challenge, the disruption to the public safety bill, or minimizes it. We're not tearing up bathrooms and floor, we're not relocating or rearranging, and it's less costly. Is that
Well,
kind of what
we still would relocate the bathrooms on the ground floor probably.
on
to
the
greater-
other side?
Yeah, on the other side.
And we still accomplished the close proximity. I mean, I think Blair's point was a one-stop shop. We still have kind of a one-stop shop. They might have to just go outside, inside.
That's right.
And will there
Did
be
you have
more
a
of
kind of-
a entrance fee, is that addressed here, or, like, where will the entrance be? The same?
In this particular scheme here, we showed entrance still remaining on the north side. So
Okay.
parking would still be on the south. That could be, on the other scheme where it was attached, we did an alternate just so we could have different options where we put the new front entry on the south side. Both
Now-
schemes could accommodate either direction.
That's right. We've discussed that, and we looked at that. Now, maybe, tying to Ocean Boulevard and having some stairs off the south or that southwest corner where it's a little flatter on that hockey stick portion, might be an option too. If you wanted to have a separate entrance, or if you like the combined entrance.
So what would connect both buildings, sort of a main hallway in the middle?
So on the second floor, we show kind of a connection. And again, that helps us tie into the elevator access and
Yeah.
everything there.
Breezeway, walkway kind of thing.
Breezeway walkway.
It could be a conditioned corridor on the ground floor too now.
And the square footage it's kind of interesting how it fits in, it seems to fit in there perfectly in this little hexagon. It is the square footage that we've been looking for, and
That's correct. So during the programming meeting on this building and the assessment of this building, it was determined that it was just over 12,000 square feet, 12,500 was kind of the need. And so all of these buildings are, right in there, 13 to 14,000 square feet. It's kind of what we're showing.
And currently, this building is around 8, 9.
It's just under 8,
Just-
like 7,800, something like that.
so we're building a little, we're not building for are we building a little bit of cushion for growth, future? I mean,
Yes.
I don't want to be like Lucy Beckham High School where we need to add on 2 years after we've finished.
When we had our programming meeting with them, we talked about 2 to 3 additional offices that could be used for storage in the meantime, but could be easily transitioned to office space if needed.
And we would obviously get in more depth with that as well and have another
Right.
reprogramming to fit the spaces that is chosen, I guess, would be the right word.
But for the first step, it looks like this space is enough for what we are looking for.
Square footage wise, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I think, Brian, you all have kept it at 2 stories currently.
Correct.
I mean, we found that the real estate area wasn't enough to fit in 2 stories. You could do 3 stories there.
We certainly could. It would obscure the mass of the existing building somewhat, but if that's the need, we can find a way to make it compatible with what's there.
You could also engineer for a 3rd floor and only build 2 at this
Sure.
stage, yeah.
Absolutely. We were also toying with some ideas of maybe parking underneath, maybe not. I don't know that we need it with the lot B next door, but that's an option.
In both these schemes with occupied ground floor, we would have some flood protection measures up to 2-3 feet, whatever the flood freeboard requirement would be. The existing building has that on the main entry. This would be a little bit different than what's there now. Right now on the ground floor, it is parking for the police stations, apparatus bay, and minimal corridor elevator lobby functions. So there'd be more occupiable functions on the ground with both of these schemes for this public safety site. We haven't talked about the grading on the site yet, but there are some challenges. There's a 3 or 4 foot drop between the lower and upper lots there. So in order to make that work from a parking standpoint, there would be some regrading or modifications to where those retaining walls are. We haven't worked that out yet, but that would be something that would be needed as part of the project scope.
If we do a ground floor parking and offices over it, or no?
I think in either scenario.
In either scenario?
Either
Okay.
scenario, we're showing kind of that bottom south of the building is right on that drop off.
Okay.
But it would just be a structural construction thing that we would build that in, retaining wall, foundations would account for that.
So for both of these options on the public safety site, adding new program adds new parking requirements to the site. So our thought on this one is we'd make the existing lot as efficient as we can. We might be able to gain a couple spaces, we might not. We know we have to account for some handicap spaces that are on-street parking now on the sites, that may lose a few there. The plan to offset that would be to designate spaces in Lot B, the northernmost sites, the ones that are least desirable for the beachgoers, to be reserved for city use, for after-hours meetings and things like that. When those aren't in session, they certainly could be used for beachgoers. But that parking lot would need to do a little bit of a double duty function to make the added program here work with the site constraints we have.
And we believe that's doable. When you look at our office hours and when we have the most staff, it's not during peak, beach visitation hours. Obviously, the need for parking for public safety is the same. They currently do use some spaces in both Lot B and Lot A. But Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that lot is rarely used. It's not full. It's used, but it's not at capacity.
I like it.
Do y'all want to
I
hear
like that.
the other two, or do we want him to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
through the other two options?
Sure.
So before,
Go ahead.
Donnie just reminded me that there is, and there'll be a lot of details to work through, but there is an underground storage tank in kind of the left corner of the new diamond, I think is about where that is, that services the generators within that facility. So we'll need to, and I think, I know that Ryan and his group have been looking at the existing stormwater. I think there's a collection system kind of in there, so we'd have some underground utility work, probably for all of these, but definitely for that one.
Yes, I'm telling
If it has to be moved, what I would suggest is do away with underground storage tank and do the smaller above the ground. That way that eliminates the need for DHEC inspections, yearly cost. It does away with that regulation. Just my 2 cents.
That's a good
Do
point.
you have an idea of the capacity of the tank, just to give us some scale?
1,500 gallon tank now.
Okay.
I don't think that, you can certainly, if there's a worst case scenario, you can get that thing filled every day if you have to.
Okay. So it's not that
The
big
need
of
for
a
a
thing.
1,500 gallon tank was, in my opinion, a little bit overkill, and going underground costs the city money. I would prefer eliminating that regulation, just mine. As the AB operator, I think. That's the central.
As the person who uses it.
Well, that does bring up another point. So the existing emergency generator is on the roof of the existing building, obviously. We don't know the capacity of that, if it has extra capacity to help this
It's got
addition
another
function.
200 gallons upstairs. I think that's a 200 gallon.
From an electrical.
You're talking about the power, your
Yeah.
power load, yeah.
I think it was sized correctly, not
Not oversized.
oversized.
So,
I mean, for the existing building.
For the
It's not like an
existing
800
building
kW.
only, yeah.
And so that could be something we would explore, whether we want another generator on top of this one or side, or if that one can be relocated.
or potentially, maybe you don't need it, if all the emergency stuff can be in the existing
You
portion.
could
Yeah.
Go
have
through the
it
corridor.
Right.
Just walk through the corridor,
so that you didn't
lights out.
need this building, because this building right now, we have to have it set up during emergencies, right?
Well, it's the public safety building, the training room, no.
So that's.
Correct. While that building was sick and under construction, this was what we used,
I
but,
gotcha.
yeah.
And just for placeholdering, this looks like about a, what, if I use your price per square foot, it's about $7 to $8 million. Is that roughly about where you are, square footage?
I'll let John answer.
That should be right. I don't know that I ran those numbers, but yes, I believe your numbers.
Just to be clear, that does or does not include any additional work in the existing building.
Yeah, that's why I asked, that's why I added to the 8.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I
so
figured there's gonna be some
7.
other, I mean, your $550 a foot's coming in around 7.2.
Right.
And my guess is you got all these other things that will come up, yeah.
That's probably accurate.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, moving on to.
Yeah, so this one's right at 12,600. Well, sorry, the one we were looking at, the secondary one. Square feet, so that's right at.
All right, the other site that we've been asked to look at is Lot B, which is currently kind of a gravel, sandy parking lot. There's a deed restriction on the property that was handed down from the state that the site be used for recreational purposes, which it currently is. So adding a city hall building to that would create some challenges. The thought process is, though, that as long as the city would maintain the number of spaces that it currently has as it's reconfigured, that it would still meet the intent of the deed restriction. That would certainly need to be verified with the state, but that seems like a reasonable request for the land use. In order to do that, though, to offset the parking that's lost by putting a building there and to offset the parking for the new occupants of the building, we think you're going to likely need to put a parking garage there. Elevated parking has a decent cost to it, and typically we might be able to get away with one level of elevated parking, but really usually your cost benefit ratio, you really need 2 levels to really make it economical in most instances. So we'd propose a 3-level garage. That would give you probably more spaces than you need on this site now, but beach parking can be a challenge, so that could be used to address that. We know the funding for this was when it was set for the city hall did not contemplate adding this scope to it, so that is a challenge. There may be other ways to address this without adding a parking structure. But I don't know what those are at this point, but it would take some more discussion with the site. But from a building standpoint, the building would be the most economical. We could design this on the north side of the site where you have the closest proximity to public safety. Those are the spaces that are least desirable for the beachgoers. The parking garage could, everything here, once again, is diagrammatic. It's not a developed design. But it could be used as a way to enhance Ocean Boulevard. Right now, that is the one kind of missing tooth along the street. Everything else kind of has some activity and street frontage.
And really, this lot just gives you ultimate freedom, right? You can do whatever, anything you would want from a building standpoint, right? This layout here is all one floor. Everything's on one floor. The next one is multiple floors, and so you can,
Do you know how many spaces we would displace by approximately? And do we know if I guess another thing is, do we know if the deed requirement requires those spaces to be at that exact location? Or could we put those spaces perhaps in I don't know what's going to happen with this location or some other close proximity to the beach location, but could we eliminate the requirement for a parking garage by maybe getting creative with we're going to displace this location?
The
and
deed
maybe
actually does reference an offset of equal market value. It's kind of interesting, just reading through it, that it doesn't tie explicitly to the number of spaces. It ties to market value.
And it doesn't tie to location.
Does not tie to
We could put them
location.
at,
So it's all, it would be up to their judgment. And it does say kind of equally usable, equal use and market value. So.
Who is this deed with, who is it?
Park,
State?
the State Parks, Parks Commission, the PRT.
PRT.
We bought it from them?
They gave us a grant for it.
And I don't know how formal or informal or could we use against the count, excuse me, spaces that are around the post office or other places where there are parking today that we're really not getting credit for. I don't know, I'm just trying to throw out some ideas here that maybe we've got some equal or attractive
Just
value
ball-
offsets that may not be on the site.
It's just ballpark, what's the cost of a parking garage? Just,
So it would be probably another 8 million, 8 to 9 million. It's about 35,000 a spot is kind of what we're
I
seeing.
feel like I feel like we
That
should.
might be at the
And that was-
tad
I think
cost
that's-
prohibitive.
I think that's
Yeah.
worth being creative.
Or we
to
get
Scott's
grants or
point.
something, yeah.
Go
Yeah.
to the next one,
Yeah.
Brian.
So another option would be to do a 3-story smaller footprint, so you'll offset less spots. Put that on the south corner with Ocean Boulevard.
I guess let me reiterate that was based on a 275, that 3-stack garage was what that number was based on.
So that gray rectangular shape just represents a parking garage?
No.
It would-
Ground
it-
floor parking.
It could be a parking garage with levels above it, or it could be just office building spaces at 2
Oh, at the
stories.
top, okay, I'm sorry.
So this one is half the footprint of the other one, so you offset half the parking spaces. And it could be located on the north end of the site as well. We just wanted to show options, so.
And you could also put parking below that, and then you're not
I think that's-
offsetting,
Yeah.
any parking to speak of.
So.
That would be the question, right? If we need to offset the parking based on the use need for the new building.
Right.
But this option does include ground parking?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, and the total area, 22,000, is that the office space, or that's total?
Total.
Okay.
That includes the parking, so these numbers would be,
Yeah, so
that
say
would be,
two levels of 7,000
Oh, that
for
is
14,000, pretty close to what you're looking for.
7,000 per level.
Okay.
One
I'm
other-
sorry, could you say that? You lost me on that.
so this option we're showing here has a first floor parking underneath and then 2 levels of office.
So that's part of the 22,000 square feet?
Yes, sir. So there's 7,000, just over 7,000 footprint. So 7,000 of parking, 7,000, 7,000, 14,000 of office.
Plus a parking garage underneath.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's one of the sevens.
And so those numbers from a cost perspective would vary, right? So the 14,000 at the 550
Yep.
and then the parking would be much less, right?
One of the potential advantages of locating the building on Ocean Boulevard is the city has some potential needs for more of a visitor center component, and having it located here is advantageous for that. I know there's,
More of a presence on the
Yeah.
beach.
Mhm.
And that, going back to this grant, I feel like that could be worded properly,
It's tourist related.
yes, right?
What are you talking about?
For this, the grant that lot.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You know, encumbered by, that if we're having a visitor center,
And,
But
I mean, that's a question for,
and also this zoning allows for minimal setbacks
I was gonna
on
ask
this
about that.
parcel as well.
Because
So if you
that's
wanted to-
under a different zone.
That's right.
You know, if you go back to the first page that shows the different parcels, that parking lot is, it's one property, but it's two parcels.
Yeah.
So the one in the bottom is a different zone. It's GC 1? No, 2?
Two
Two
in the bottom, one on the top.
and 1 at the top.
how do you all feel about if, on the parking garage scenario that's underneath the office building, that's going to be, people coming to do city business, plus I guess it's first come, first serve with the beachgoers as well? Is that how that works, if it's going to be an offset for the public parking?
I would
Um,
say it would be restricted during business hours to the staff and people doing business at City Hall.
Within the footprint of the building.
Correct.
So that would be a net, so then how do we get credit of taking the public parking if we're going to encumber it strictly for city business? I guess that would be a question. And
You know, we just happened to go out there July 3rd at lunch, and there was, in a lot that holds 450 cars, there was maybe 80 cars.
really,
Midday, you know, so,
so this might be slack capacity is what you're saying?
yeah, so the lot is so large, and we just happened to be at an off time from the hours of the day and days of the week. Clearly, in the weekend, it's booming, but
So it'll be full during off hours?
Right.
Okay, I see what you're
yeah,
saying.
one pinch we've talked about it, and they're actually gonna fly, they're gonna choose a court day.
I think the 17th.
17th is a court day, so that's kind of our fullest capacity in July, which is, kind of, we think about as busy as the parking lot will get during the work week, so a July day in the summer, and just kind of collect some data on the usage of both, to just be sure we're not creating,
A shared parking situation? No.
Yeah, an unfavorable shared parking situation. The other one that we're a little bit kind of concerned about is when there's a big event at the Windjammer or at night, that would during the week would
Coincide
potentially
with
coincide with a council
council
meeting.
meeting.
So those are kind of, if we're gonna have a pinch, I think it would be few and far between, but I think those are the times that we'd have them. Like a
I feel like,
midday in
I
the
feel like
summer.
those though, even, those shows start at 7, when we have meetings that a lot of people show up to, we could even, if we knew that was happening, we could set it for 5, And
Yeah.
when
Yeah,
there's
we
tons
don't
of people
think-
here, yeah, I don't.
Usually the big crowd for you all is
It's
a little
early.
bit earlier
Yeah.
than the big crowd at an event.
Yeah.
But
And
those
we don't,
would
and
be
we
the
don't keep the
two-
crowds as long as the wind. They're
Sometimes.
not that good.
After the council meeting, just head right over. You already have a space.
But we think that those would be the two instances where we might have a challenge. But I think it's manageable. I
Yeah.
think from our perspective, the programming, we have some flexibility there.
And I think the other, as we've kind of talked around, we have had, throughout the years, we've had discussions with the PRT. They've always kind of responded in a very reasonable tone, as long as you account for it in some way. But we just never know. I mean, the deed does require that we get kind of written authorization and permission before we do it. So whatever direction you go, that will be a next step, to just be sure and kind of say, hey, here is the plan. We're expecting them to be reasonable about it. We think, from a programming standpoint, it should work well, but that's also really a wrinkle, and not even a wrinkle, but it's a consideration in both plans. I mean, both plans, we're planning on impacting that lot to some degree.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, to think about when we think about or talk about a parking garage in that area, we know now today, with the amount of parking available during high tide in the summer, there's barely any space in the dry sand beach to accommodate the current beach visitors with the current parking. So the thought is, if you add several layers to that, people are going to come. Those spaces will be full, but there's not going to be enough space on the beach to accommodate for all those folks. So I think that, and they're not going to be walking a couple miles down 21st to set up their chair. They're going to, people are going to want to be there. So that's just something to think about that would create a challenge in just overcrowding on the beach if we do
We
that.
don't want to add parking to that area, or
I think it would be a challenge to
Right.
accommodate that amount of people on the beach during high tide.
Yeah.
So back to the placeholdering, so it sounds like this option 2 is about 7 to 8 million. The one with the double garage, that was roughly 16, is that what, 8 and 8? And then this third option would be 8 and 4, because it'd be half the parking garage, so roughly 12.
That's
I'm
probably
just
about right.
I'm just trying to ballpark
Yeah,
'em.
yeah, that's probably accurate. And I can put those numbers together and send
Okay.
them to you on these.
Is there anything else that the committee would like them to look at, evaluate? Any unanswered questions that we need to,
I like the synergy of option 2, because you're right there. Not that one, keep going back. No,
Disconnected
no, that's
from
3 and
PS2.
4
Okay.
option. There you
Yeah.
go, that one.
That's my favorite
Because,
also.
because it brings all the services together, and there are less issues, a myriad of less issues. So, and you could easily put a event space on the top with very little cost, or a place for the city to be able to do events, but engineer it for 3 floors, so that 20 years from now, if we want to, we can expand.
does that change the cost at all by doing that, foreshadow that growth?
A little bit, it would. One thing I'd want to study is kind of where we're going to put the HVAC systems and that sort of stuff, because typically those go on the roof in a condition like this. So we would just want to make sure we take all that into account.
Yeah, yes.
I'd like to see, I don't know, maybe how we can explore some of these trade-offs in the parking options if we do go one of these other ones, if there are places around, I mean, I don't know what we're gonna end up doing with this spot here, but quantify how many spaces we might lose within there that we'd have to replace, and maybe check out some options.
And also because even with
Parking
this,
here, yeah.
even with this option, we have to address the Lot B parking, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't know that we couldn't just do it all in Lot A, kind of our municipal parking, but otherwise, I think we're just envisioning people parking in that lot. And I can't foresee that the PRT would have an issue with that if it
If we're not
remains
parking.
There is no
completely-
trade-off, you're
If
saying.
we're not gonna
So-
go, if
Yeah.
we're not gonna put signs in that say parking only for City
Right.
Hall,
I just don't think
Correct.
there's even a need to do it. I
Then
mean, it's
it's
so
just-
lightly
right.
used
During the
already
day.
during the day.
That makes sense.
and it's open,
just- it takes
right
that out
now,
of the
you can
equation.
park there and do anything you want. I mean, you could go park there and go to Harris Teeter if you wanted to.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
why.
so this eliminates all issues with the parking lot or the deed restrictions or anything.
I think so. I mean, we would, again, we'd need to, to be safe, we'd run it through them to be sure, but I can't foresee that they would have.
I mean, is
The
there
only-
a con to this plan? I mean, I guess square footage. But other than somewhat being hemmed in by square footage, which, as we've said, you could potentially go a 3rd floor.
The big cons are
All sorts of
the
options.
shape of it's maybe not quite ideal, but we can work with that and we can massage that from what we have here. The cost of doing some rework in the existing building, you could say that's a con.
But
there's
we're
a lot of
really
positives
talking
to it.
about bathrooms.
And EOC and
Oh, in the UC.
You're connecting through
Mhm, through
the
the-
existing EOC.
And
I don't know.
that's up for discussion, right?
Sure.
Maybe we'd want that, maybe you don't want that. It depends on how connected you want these two buildings. It could be completely separate altogether, and you gotta walk outside to go across.
I would not want that. I mean, I think the whole purpose of trying to consolidate is to create some synergy among departments and have a one-stop shop and this feeling of, you're in that middle section and you can walk through basically every city department. So I would see that as a con if we're moving there.
And I don't know that this is a con necessarily, but in just envisioning that, I mean, it appears to be so kind of hidden behind the front entrance, a little bit tucked away from Pavilion, tucked away from J.C. Long, tucked away from Ocean Boulevard. One of our kind of guiding principles was to create a little bit of a public arrival and kind of a sense of, kind of public pride, and I think that this one has the challenge of being obscured. Kind of any way, I don't even know where the entrance would be, but it seems to be a challenge of just kind of visibility, and I'm sure a creative kind of, once the design part of it unfolds. But I think, I can't see how you design it so that it does have a real public presence of, hey, City Hall is here, this is kind of our community gathering space.
I mean, I would see that pop at the corner, at the northern corner, at the existing entrance.
The existing entrance of the fire station.
That's, envision North Charleston. It's exactly what North Charleston has right now. And then once you go inside, you go through security, then you go to all the different departments. Everybody's in one building.
Yeah.
So that
It's
existing
just more
entrance.
of your, the way you
So,
advertise, sign, your signage and everything else.
Correct.
It's not the police department or the fire, it's the city.
It's a
And-
municipal complex.
Right.
yeah, and we got a huge amount of space up there in that northern corner. If you want to plant some trees or grass or whatever and make it more inviting, do anything you want to do.
Can we maybe do one more thing too? Aside from the cost, I know these are a lot more expensive options, but can we check maybe with with the lobbyists or some of the folks to see if there might be any grant money available for City Hall renovation or rebuild? I think this year in the budget, some of the municipalities around have received funding for it. So before we just kind of outright discard one of the options because of the, price tag, if it's going to create more parking or do something enhancing the total option, and maybe there's some grant money available that we can at least take a look at.
There is currently some flexibility in some of the tourism funds that was changed by the legislature a couple of years ago that allows a municipality to pledge some tourism money towards a bond issue. And I think if it's tourism related, if we talk about a better experience for a visitor, we have some grounding place for people who come to visit to learn about our community and create some visitor center portion,
Yeah.
then.
That could get funded
That could
at the
be.
state level. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So we will, 17th, we're planning to come out and kind of fly a drone and do some counts on some cars and parking, just to see what your lot B looks like, this lot A. And so we'll report back on those numbers as well. Seaman Whiteside's been quiet in the background today. Well, obviously, we're looking into the stormwater implications as well as the parking. So that'll be some more investigation of what would need to be done depending on what site is chosen and whether underground storage or if we can tie in to the existing storm system. Anything to add there?
So if we,
Yeah.
if we were to keep, so it sounds like everybody likes two more than one. And then if we were to keep going, looking at the potential grant and, a visitor center, that would have to be either 3 or 4, right? That, like, we probably couldn't fit, we couldn't have like a visitor center in this option.
I was thinking that we could do it on the ground floor.
On the ground floor.
So that would be kind of the welcome to the public and the,
Okay.
Like
I was
where-
wondering if we should continue to look at maybe 2 and 3 or 4, just to try to narrow down what we're.
Yeah, it looks like on this side, option 2 is the most desirable, just because of the lack of cons if you have a slightly detached building with a connection. Is there a preference on the other two, the other two concepts in the other location?
I mean, I like
That
the idea.
we
of
would like to
having- I like
explore.
having the parking under, as opposed to a parking garage,
So option 4,
I guess. But,
But you can place that building anywhere.
That's
Right.
right. And
Correct.
we could do that with both areas, right? With the bigger footprint, we could elevate it as well.
okay.
well, and you could do it, do you mind going to the 4th one? Maybe, you talked about this section sort of being the missing tooth along Ocean Boulevard. Rather than vertical, you can do it horizontally, so you cover a little bit more of the street side.
Yeah.
twist it 90 degrees.
Yes,
to get
twist
more
it,
of a
mhm.
Ocean Boulevard presence, yeah.
We can, we haven't done the site planning piece of these, so if we do want to narrow down, we can lay out the landscaping and flow and traffic and everything to just help better visualize what it would feel and look like, functionally on
But I
the
mean,
exterior.
well, basically, we can
can
place
place it
any
anywhere,
of these
yeah.
rectangles anywhere on that space.
Yes.
Right?
Do we need to
That's-
con-
There's not any restriction that,
There is, just, it drops off in grade pretty far from that top left corner going down towards Ocean Boulevard. But, so that just affects our flood height.
Okay.
And so that's where, down on this corner, it lends itself better to having parking underneath. So we elevate and don't have to flood protect as much. And being on the higher end, we don't, it's almost as high as public safety. We can, 2 or 3 feet of flood protection.
I would say with this option, if you put the longer part of the building across Ocean, towards Ocean Boulevard, to me, that looks better aesthetically than a skinny building in the corner.
What would that do to the traffic flow, and then the beachgoers all have to go around the public building to get to the beach, or how's that?
I think if you,
No big deal,
if
yeah.
you put it on towards the corner, you still have, you can create a sense of a connection between the parking and Ocean Boulevard where that existing building is there now,
yeah.
And you can do walkways
around the building.
to help direct people.
Yeah. I just feel like a parking garage is gonna be frowned upon.
We don't disagree with you.
I mean,
We just-
I know you can make them look nice. There's a really nice one in Palm Beach, Florida, but.
Well, you look at the one in downtown Charleston, that's sort of, the iconic Joe Riley building where what's the name of that hotel? Right on King Street.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a parking garage.
It doesn't
Charleston
look like a
Place,
parking
yeah, right next to the car. So I think they're
They can
designed.
be
Mhm.
done, but I just feel like,
It's a large cost,
yeah.
Mhm.
sure.
So would you all like to see anything else on this option? So pick one option of in each site and maybe articulate the cost in a clearer way and present that? Do we want to continue to have conversations at the committee level, or are we at a point that we would want to get some feedback from the rest of council before we
I wouldn't
take
mind-
any
I wouldn't mind
direction?
one more round at committee, but it's up to
Okay.
you all. I mean, I think it would be.
We're not in a big hurry.
No,
Yeah.
just want to know next
And that-
steps.
Yeah, and that way we might be able to check out some of this grant opportunities and impact parking and just kind of get you've done a great job so far, I think, bringing us down the path here.
Is it a non-starter to try and, if you can go back to one of the satellite, all of the water commission's mess, for lack of a better word,
Tanks.
and their entrance on Palm Boulevard, is it a non-starter to see if we can do something and incorporate them, build a little bit bigger building on their site that then ties all that together and cleans all of that up?
I would say that some initial conversations have been had about if a new city hall building would include excess square footage, would there be any interest in them relocating there? Again, back to this one-stop shop idea.
Renting from the city, basically.
Correct, leasing some space from the city. Then that would be something, I think the initial reaction was positive. What they would do with their existing location, I don't know. I think that there's still a need for those tanks, and they have a lot of equipment. So I don't know if we could achieve what you have articulated in sort of your goal, but if there is excess square footage we can consider, then I think that
And it seems like
May
it's
be
at least-
feasible.
It's at least worth a conversation, because it all connects. And that way, we have a presence on Palm Boulevard, we have a presence as you come down the other boulevards. It just ties everything together with the parking.
You're talking about the water tower
Yeah,
footprint?
yeah, all that. And it's an old building right
Yeah, they
across
have
the
one
street
across the
here
street.
Yeah.
that at some
that-
point in
that
time
seems
will have to be
logical.
renovated or demolished. So just, to me, there's a lot of synergy there in doing that. It might
I
be too much.
believe that all of the stuff, there's a lot of stuff behind their office building,
Mhm.
and I think that's all still serving a function. And I think that that stuff is always, even if the old building wasn't there, it's gonna create a barrier between the Palm Boulevard presence and the Ocean Boulevard.
Hasn't
We
that
can
footprint-
verify that, but it's all the cell
Well,
towers, all the
That's, yeah,
antennas, the
it's
water
become a
tower.
telecom hub.
Yeah, I mean, it really is and I don't think there's any connecting through that stuff, but we can
Okay. Well,
vet
that's-
that out and
that's good.
verify
Yeah.
that.
But at the very least, the building, the
Yeah.
office.
Yeah.
But I think the office
Good.
space, they've told us if there's an opportunity, they'd like to. at
But if
least
if we look at
talk
all
to.
the assets, including the property here and the property we have over there behind Donnie's building, all those assets together, maybe if you're gonna spend the money, you do it, clean it all up one time and do it
Yeah,
right.
make it look better.
I mean, the big issue is in the water tower, which I understand we still use. But I'm also told we don't.
We can verify,
Believe us.
yeah, we can see if there's any flexibility in their infrastructure on that site.
So John, could you and your team maybe spell out the cost of these two options, one for each location? And maybe we can flush out some of these details between now and our next meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. Did y'all pick one or the other on the other Lot B side, or it doesn't really, but I mean,
I
they're
think
gonna
it'd be
be
nice to see
similar.
both, but we're done with that. Are we
Yeah.
all in kind of agreement with that option one is off the table? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt like the detached parking garage option, I think I'm hearing that's off the table, right?
Due to the
You
cost.
didn't like it, I know that it doubled the cost.
You know, that's just one where, depending upon the use and depending upon funding opportunities, I just didn't want to toss it out. I mean, it is cost prohibitive if we were on our own, but if there's some,
If we find kind of that there's a funding source to potentially
If
Cover-
that gets us,
cover
if
that.
that gets us a
That might
big
put it
pot of
back.
money.
if it covers that piece somehow, somewhere, is that an option that, I don't want to just, it's great to know the cost, but I hate throwing out an option if, and maybe you all know some funding sources that have been used for these types of things that are going to have a major public use. But I just, we can ask the question. If the answer is no, there's nothing available, then it's maybe off the table.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds great, so we'll put
Does that all
some
make sense?
cost numbers to this, and we'll come back with the parking study from the 17th, and go from there.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Thank y'all. Our next items of business are trash.
Thank you.
We have discussion and consideration of the commercial bulk container services. And we've got,
Give me a second, I have
Okay.
just a few slides to.
I was gonna say, 'cause we've got page 4 of our agenda shows us the cans, days serviced, and the money. Thank y'all.
All right, give me one second. This little contraption doesn't let me move, so I'm gonna stay here if y'all don't mind. All right, so as we talked during the workshop, meeting last month, the city has been historically paying for the collection of commercial bulk containers, island-wide, and that includes brick and mortar businesses and condominiums. The current vendor increased the price from approximately 75 cents per yard to $3 starting June 1st. I think that there was a change in ownership. This has been the price the city has been paying for over 18 years, more than that. And that got increased. We received a note in May that was the new price starting in June. We went from an annual cost of about $75,000 a year to at $3 to $188,000. Like I said, the city has been paying for this for as far as we know. We believe this started after Hugo to help struggling businesses after the hurricane, but that's just speculation on our part. But it has been an ongoing service. We are not aware of any other municipality in the state that pays for bulk container collection for businesses. Some do pay for condos and condominiums and that bulk container collection, but not for businesses. As you probably know and have seen, the cost has not been the only thing that has increased. The frequency of collection and the volume has increased dramatically over time. We see a lot of activity on the island. Our businesses are thriving, and that with that comes just a lot of generation of garbage that we have been paying for.
Can I ask a quick question on that, Desiree?
Yeah.
Is some of that activity nearly daily that we're picking up, or how does it?
Donnie, why don't you sit down and so that we can hear you
I
better.
think that's an important bullet point for us and what's driving up our volumes and all, I think.
Yes, and I think that the exhibit that I included in the packet includes the frequency for some of these locations. There are some that are picked up daily, well, not daily, but 4 times a week, 3 times a week. Some are just once a week. So Donnie, can you speak to that in more
Yes.
detail?
So the vendor is over here 6 days a week. And there are some heavy uses with some businesses that are collected 5 days a week by that vendor.
So as soon as we learned about the increase in the costs, we issued a new request for bids to get other prices. And those bids ranged between $250, we got 2 bids for $250, one for $279, and one for $375. So we want to talk to the committee about our options to consider. I think that the big question that the city needs to answer is, does the city want to continue paying for this service for both condos and for all businesses? If we do, the annual cost at the low bid at $250 would take us up to an annual cost of about $250,000 a year. Another option that we want to bring to the table is our current provider has given the city a proposal to continue servicing for 6 months. That would give us the time to transition out of it if that's the direction that we want to go, and the cost to do that would be at the highest rate of $375. And at a 6-month transition period would cost the city about $180,000, and that would be for both businesses and condominiums. If the city wants to continue, so there's a question about, do we want to continue to pay for both, or do we want to just continue to pay for condominiums and then pass on the responsibility of collection of businesses to the business? Then after that 6-month period, we can consider entering into an agreement with a low bidder to cover the cost of the garbage collection for condominiums. The exhibit that's included in your packet distinguishes all of the locations that we currently service between businesses and condos. I'll also be reminded that a few years ago, the city has been encouraging and actually transitioning some of these condominiums, particularly in Wild Dunes, away from single-family 96-gallon containers to bulk container, just increasing the efficiency because some of these have a huge number of single-family gallons that have to be serviced pretty much manually. And then after those 6 months, we transition the businesses out of that service, give them a little bit of wiggle room for them to schedule and organize their pickup. And the cost for the city to continue to service, approximately, we would be asking for new bids, but it would be approximately $95,000 to $100,000 just to service the condominiums. in order for the city to guarantee the best price and we're not getting, gouged by anybody, we've talked about this and believe that we should give everybody an opportunity to provide a sealed bid. I think the contractors would prefer that as well, for a revised scope of service from what we had originally, and historically been doing. So hopefully that sets the stage for a conversation about what we've been doing, where we are, and what our options are, and just get some direction from council on next steps. One thing to consider too, if we change vendors, the new vendor will need approximately 1 or 2 months, maybe more, to order new dumpsters. So these dumpsters are owned by the company that are servicing them. So if we change vendors, there's going to be a transition between the old vendor removing their dumpsters and the new one installing theirs. Some of them may have some in stock, some may have to purchase and get them delivered. So there's a little bit of a time challenge there that we need to keep in mind.
Thoughts?
Are there any questions? And then after we talk about
Things to
this,
share?
I do want to bring up, and maybe I do this now, the municipal compactor. But I don't want to, I think it's a separate issue. I don't want to confuse the conversation. But just know that there's another component to this related to the municipal compactor that's located in Lot
Why
A.
don't you talk about that, because it's all related.
All right, I'll do
It's
it.
part of the same,
It's the policy of the city, we're gonna pay for trash or not.
Correct. So right now, we have a compactor in Lot A that's right behind the public safety building. There are 10 businesses from Front Beach that currently deposit their garbage there. That compactor is serviced by the same vendor. It is, the cost of the service is being paid by the city, just like we have with any other bulk commercial service. But the user fee, we have been passing and we've been passing that along to the businesses that use it. So every year, our finance department sends a bill for the collection fee. Because the compactor is owned by the city, we get the bill from Charleston County landfill. And so there's a collection fee that we pay, the user fee that each individual business pays. Those folks don't have really any space within their property to have their own dumpster. That's part of the reason why this space was made available to them. So we believe, that they have very limited options for their garbage. Some of the businesses on Front Beach, however, do use 96-gallon carts that are serviced by the Public Works Department. Most of them are the condos, but there are less than a handful, businesses that do that. One challenge or potential downside is if the city stops paying for the commercial dumpster service of the compactor and passes out on that cost to those businesses, that some of them may decide, well, I would like to be treated like the other businesses, and I just want to have 96-gallon carts in front of my business that is collected by the Public Works Department. And that would create some challenges for our crews to increase the number of cans that are right now that would be on Front Beach and would need to be serviced. It's not aesthetic. It would be a huge challenge and something that Donnie feels fairly strongly about that we should stay away from. Do you want to speak to that, Donnie?
How long has the compactor been in place?
How long the compactor has been in place?
Well, I've been in Public Works for about 20 years, and it was here when I got here. So longer than 20 years, and before that, they had a 30-yard roll-off that the businesses just threw their garbage over before they went to a compactor.
Okay, and that
So
always been city provided. I'm just looking at.
As far as I'm aware.
The precedent of the city paying for trash, that's.
So, and if you don't mind, originally Joe Washington, who just recently retired, his first job was the commercial operation where we had a regular rear loading apparatus that had an attachment on it that cabled the commercial dumpster, and his job was that route where he serviced the commercial dumpsters. So it was a city service originally, as far as I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing this, maybe I'm mistaken, but it's sort of two different transactions here. The first transaction is, how do we get to the point of getting a currently market-based contract with our provider, who's going to take the dumpsters and haul the dumpster trash? And then we've got policy on what are we going to pick up and not pick up on behalf of the city, and what are we going to pass off? I mean, are we trying to come up today with what is, what's going to be in, what's going to be out? And for us to give you the consideration to go get another contract for picking up the trash for the compactors, to me, seems like a an easier decision. The other one is probably a more complicated policy decision.
I think we have to know what's in and what's out before they go get the contract. I think that's.
For the volumes, or, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. Right now, the price per yard is based on the existing service.
Right.
So this gets to the minimums. You're expecting minimum requirements, or?
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's why,
That was one of my
if we change the scope and the path is, we do not want to get into a contract for 3 years that commits the city to paying for commercial bulk container for all businesses, then that would be a decision point that we would need to know, so that we can ask all these bidders for a new price per yard based on the new scope.
Then are we cart before horse? Do we need that? Do we need to determine what we want to have in or out, and then go back and see before we consider signing the contract?
Yeah.
The
I think-
option that gives us the most flexibility is entering into a 6-month agreement. I think regardless of what the city does, whether, the decision point of what's in and what's out, what the city's going to be paying for, that 6-month agreement, or that 6-month option, gives us the time to do that.
And is that the recommendation?
My recommendation is I would like to get something in place for at least 6. I don't want this price to continue to go
No,
up.
I'm with you.
And I do think, this would be a significant change in policy that needs to be discussed and thought out with council and the businesses. So having something in place for 6 months gives us the flexibility to go down that path. And if after 6 months, the city wants to continue that service to every, businesses and condominiums, then we would enter into a new contract at that point with one of the bids that we've received for that. But if we want to change the scope and not do that, then we would need to know sooner rather than later.
So I guess what I'm asking then is, for consideration for the committee today, would we want to keep it very simple and say, we want to consider giving you the authority to go for the 6-month, $375 contract, give us the breathing room, and then we can work out, a committee and with council, what is the policy, and do it thoughtfully so that we've got a transition plan with either the businesses, condos, or however we decide. I'm just.
Correct.
Keep the consideration very simple, yeah.
At the simplest level, yes, that
Yeah.
would be the first step, is securing something for the current services that we provide at that rate.
Give you a 6-month breathing room. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
From my perspective, I would go for going and just sign the contract. I don't see that we are going to ever turn the businesses loose to collect their own trash, because then you got different vendors, different dumpsters, and we still have the compactor issue. And so I just don't see that as working. I see the city as paying for this, and then if the city doesn't think that we should be paying for it, that's a different discussion of whether we then pass that cost on to businesses, and if so, at what level. The business's position is that they pay taxes at a pretty high rate, and that they should be getting trash collection. But to me, it's two different things. One is, how do you pay for it? And two is, do we want multiple vendors on the island? And everybody doing it a different way, and then people trying to cheat the system by using the 98-gallon containers. I just see that as a little bit of chaos.
I think that there's the potential for chaos, but I think that, again, here we are trying to reinvent a wheel that the whole rest of the state and every other municipality in the country has figured out a way that the city doesn't pay for commercial trash. I mean, we're the only one in the whole state,
Well, we haven't surveyed everyone, but
but that we know of. I mean,
but
No, but
we're not aware.
You go to New York, for instance, the cities are paying, I mean, the businesses are paying for it, but it's trash collection by one vendor. They don't have multiple trucks running around, and they're a tight area. That's my problem, is that we got a tight situation here.
One exception, I would believe, is the city of Charleston, the market area. Those businesses use single-family gallons, which is the sort of the downside that we talked about at Front Beach.
like residential.
Correct. But those that don't have a bulk container would have that option, and those are serviced by the Public Works Department.
Well, yeah, and I think, again, I'm for today, I'd like to consider giving you the authority for the 6-month contract, and we can't transition out fast enough to get to the long-term contract anyway, even if we wanted to today. But then maybe see the gates of, hey, if we just did pure residential, this is what the cost is. If we layer on the condos, this is what it's going to cost us. And then if we add on the compactor and just see the different stepping stones, but also see it in a 3-year window. Because the 3-year cost to the city is really what we've got to consider. And then I think the question is going to be, do we absorb it, to Blair's point, because we've always done it? Or do we go and join the rest of the world and get to a market, we've been shocked by a market-based price adjustment, which is, it is what it is. We've also enjoyed the discount for many years, so we've got to take that into consideration. So it just shifted on us. But it's a significant cost, and, my take would be that, maybe we find some amenable transition period and kind of figure out a way to join the rest of the world. We may have some special situations with a compactor where it doesn't make sense to, but if we can see these gates of what the cost is and who's going to be impacted for the 3-year total cost of ownership for the contract, I think that would give us a visibility of what we're shifting and what we're not. I don't know if does that make sense?
Well, that's what I did it here just in an annual cost. I think you're asking for certainly the entire length of the contract.
Yeah, is that 95,000 the incremental just for the condos, or is that the condos plus
Just condos.
That
That's
would
just
just be
condo.
condos.
So that's all we would provide, so that would only be, okay.
If the city then says, we'll service and pay for the bulk container for condominiums, as we currently do,
Pass
the
the
cost would be about 100,000.
But that doesn't include the compactor, or does?
No.
Does not good.
The
So that- I mean-
compactor, if the city decides to pass on, have each business be responsible for their own garbage collection, those businesses that currently use a compactor, we currently bill them for the user fee. The city would be billing them for the entire cost, for the collection service plus a user fee. And it's just a challenge, I know we don't want to be in the collection business, but we've sort of been related to the user fee because we get the bill. So there's already a system in place. It certainly would need to be tweaked. But that would be just added on to that process for those businesses that use a compactor.
So for the commercial businesses that use the rollout garbage, like the residential garbage can, are they paying for that, or is that just being picked up as if it's a house?
That is being picked up by a Public Works Department during their regular garbage collection.
Is there a way of preventing that so that they would then want to use the compactor? I mean,
So the
it
city-
seems like in some ways that's cheating the system. Like they're acting as if they're a residence and they're not. I mean,
So the city code establishes that any location that uses, or any commercial business that uses more than 2 90-gallon containers could be required by the Public Works Director to get a bulk container. So that's currently in place.
so if you just use 1 or 2,
You're fine,
you're fine.
according to the code. And I think that would still be the case. But there
is
are, unless we change that.
And is that the way it's happening?
There are currently locations on Front Beach that, in island-wide, that use more than 2-gallon containers that have not been required to use a bulk container, and we service those.
And so
I mean,
why
just
are
like
we-
houses, we have short-term.
So why are we not enforcing something that's already in our code?
I think
I think
that,
the code says it's a judgment call. I mean, I think the judgment just hasn't been to require that yet, but
yeah, the code doesn't require that. It says commercial establishments may be required to use a bulk container if they exceed, more than 2-gallon containers. And it's up to the Public Works Department to decide to make that judgment call.
And I think if we're covering it all anyway, currently, I mean, there's no real impetus to do that. But I think if this group was to say, hey, we want to get out of the commercial trash collection and payment process, it probably would make sense at that point to start, whittling that away. And I don't know we've never really taken an inventory of how many commercial cans there are, how many establishments have more than 2. I don't know that it's
I mean,
a
if
lot.
you include the short-term rentals like Ocean Boulevard, a lot of those businesses, and that's what they are, some of them have 12 cans.
But how many pure,
I mean, 622 Ocean,
Commercial.
How many pure commercial
short-term
establishments
rental.
use more than 2 cans?
Commercial as in, like the condo, like Dunescape,
No, not
pure,
condominiums.
like
Just-
front beach commercial restaurant?
just none, more than 2. But you could have the potential for someone like Smugglers to say, I want to use not 2 90-gallon cans. That, and just a sidebar, every year we discuss, Debbie and now Deborah, who uses the compactor and what percentage, and that's how this thing is divvied up. So a business that doesn't quite use the amount, like Coda upstairs, they don't use the amount of space in the compactor that the Windjammer or the dinghy use. So Windjammer, dinghy gets more of the
Allocation.
user fee allocation, and that's kind of how, and we're putting in place, just so you know, each individual business has a code to try to drill down on who uses the biggest part of that compactor.
So question, if I may. If the city were to say, everybody on Front Beach, every business must use the compactor unless they can support using 2-gallon containers, who would that impact currently?
VFW and Pappy's.
So those are currently businesses that do not use a compactor and have single cans? More
Yes,
than 2?
as well as the Front Beach restrooms, which has 4.
But that's the cities.
Right.
So that would be a consideration, that we have a level playing field on Front Beach. Every business, unless you generate trash that could be accommodated within 2 gallon, then you'd have to use the compactor for garbage.
And where does recycling come into this? Is that, does anyone down there recycle?
Good luck.
Well, I mean, if they were paying for it, and they were actually paying the money for how much trash they're generating, they might think harder about trying to recycle. I mean, I would.
That is correct, and I have
I
advised,
mean, I feel like that's kind of something we need to think about.
I've advised some businesses, specifically the restaurant at 41st Avenue, the J, recycle it and cut down on the amount of times that your garbage is collected, put it in the recycle that's free, and it will cut down on your bottom line at the end of the year with the user fee. And he did do that, and the county had the containers down there. So, yes, but it's labor intensive to separate, so there's a cost analysis for that business owner.
But I imagine a lot of the restaurant debris is recyclable kind of stuff. So there's, and I think what Katie's saying is that there is no incentive it's all incentive to dump it, not recycle it.
So,
And there's also no incentive to try to minimize, garbage. Right now, a business just calls Donnie and says, we need more frequency, we need another pickup this week. And we just add it to our schedule and pay for it, and I just think that over time, it's going to get really expensive for the city and something to consider. I think at $70,000 a year, maybe, and this has come up before, just, in full disclosure, we've had this conversation with prior councils as, when we go through the budgeting process, what are some cost savings opportunities for the city? And it's been discussed that, we're sort of unique in this by providing this service for businesses. But maybe at $70,000, it was, not insurmountable. But when we're talking about $250,000, I think that it's a worth of a conversation about what the city's policy would be.
My position is, I would prefer to go to what the other municipalities are doing and have a smooth transition and have the commercial businesses take care of their own debris.
how often do you bill the user fee for the compactor?
It's once a year.
Once a year, okay. So if the city were to continue paying for this, but then bill it out as a user fee or attach it to a business license, we could do that, but because of the cost, we probably couldn't do that annually. It'd have to be done monthly, is that right? Or quarterly?
I think we could still do it annually.
We could still do it annually,
Just
but
be out.
would be fronting
We
the
could be fronting
cost
all that money.
and expecting those businesses to pay, and certainly, tying it to the business license. It's one path, however, if somebody doesn't pay, will the city
Well,
be
if you don't
pulling
pay,
a
you don't have a
license?
business license. And I would think that you would say, Pappy shows up and says, all right, I need a business license for next year, all right? Well, how much volume are you gonna use on trash? Multiply that by the number, per unit, okay, this is what you owe us. I don't know if we get pushback from them or not, if all of a sudden it's, 10 grand that you owe for trash for the year.
I think if we were to do that, it would be better to not essentially loan taxpayer money to the businesses for a year and then hope we're going to get collected at
No,
the other end. We'd
you're
want
doing
to
it
either
the
have
other
them
way
do a
around.
deposit or,
Blair's saying
You do it at the beginning of
At the begin-
beginning of the year.
At the beginning of the
So
year.
this is how much it's gonna be, yeah.
and collect it up front. You should
Yeah,
say, yeah.
yeah.
But we would be collecting from just the businesses that use the compactor or all businesses?
Anybody that has a business license potentially, you just add that as a waste fee. I mean,
I think if you're getting.
Donnie can speak to this a lot better than I can, but I think it's gonna be a nightmare if everybody picks up their own trash.
I think if you're getting it on the front end, and I don't know if that's possible, but if that is, that might be our best solution, but I don't like the getting it on the,
It's not, why is it not possible?
If a business goes out of business, then they paid a fee in advance.
Well, so.
I guess we'd have to, then potentially you reimburse them I
Well,
feel like they're.
But you don't get reimbursed for your business license. If you go out of business, that's.
True.
That's,
I think it just would be harder to collect if we bill in advance. I would recommend billing quarterly, personally, from a financial standpoint. I think a business can handle it quarterly instead of handling it annual fee.
yeah, because I don't know how much that would be.
If we did it-
Like the Windjammer, for instance.
If we
What
did
would
it-
it cost annually to haul their trash?
If we did,
So
are
the-
you saying if we did
We've
it
got the numbers
quarterly,
in
we
here.
could do it in advance though? Because that,
It would probably be best
So
to do it in
that-
advance.
So I guess
That
we're
could work.
talking about sort of the operations of collecting that money, whether we just let them schedule their own garbage collection and pay for it themselves and decide how frequent they need garbage collection. I guess the downside, Blair, to your point, is lots of different vendors here, a lot of garbage trucks in and out of the island, multiple,
Some do and some don't. You
Some
got
do and some
trash
don't.
piled up. Whose responsibility is it?
and then the
Different
other
days,
option is still
different-
them paying for it, but paying the city and the city taking control of the entire contract and the city just finding a way of collecting,
Yeah.
taking that money. I think that's much more complicated and fraught for, just, I think it leaves more space for just headaches with collection, with people arguing, well, why are you collecting twice a week or 3 times? I think I could do it for 1 week, once a week, and it'd be cheaper for me. And then you're trying to justify a collection schedule with every business on the island that could just be, to me, fraught with issues potentially.
You're right. I mean, it's a Hobson's choice.
Sure.
Which one's worse? And Deborah's over there wringing her hands and grinding her teeth right now.
I guess in my mind, if every community, if businesses are used to paying for garbage collection, I mean, to me, that's frankly a cost of doing business.
But in tight quarters, which is what we have, you don't see that as much. Downtown Charleston is an interest.
But I think we're saying in tight quarters, Front Beach, we're gonna continue with the compactor. Right?
That's an option, yeah.
Isn't that- I mean, that's kind of what we're-
That's a policy option. And they would pay for it,
but
yeah.
we
And they
would
would pay
continue
for
to
it.
run that
Okay.
service.
And that's,
So we'd be collecting out of 10 businesses rather than, I don't know, the list includes their, 5 times that, island-wide.
so I'm going to go back to, I mean, just to kind of keep things moving along, maybe can we just, make a motion to consider extending the current contract for 6 months at the $375, and subsequently we'll address the policy issues with how we're going to divvy up the cost. But I think for the consideration, I think the motion would be simply approve the 6-month extension for $375.
Is that,
That's a motion.
yeah. Second.
This just gives us wiggle room to ensure that we have consistent service for the next 6 months and give the city and council the opportunity to flush out what the policy is going to be, whether it stays the same, and at that point, we enter into a new contract with a lower bid, or we change the scope, get new bids, and then decide at that point, what the services are going to be provided, the locations where the service is going to be provided.
I do think that if it were the intention of the city to get out, part of our struggle is kind of publicizing, getting businesses prepared to take it over, if that's the will of the city. So I guess I would guard against just doing it for 6 more months and then not making policy decisions pretty quickly to be able to give us
Right.
We need to get right on
the
it.
time
Correct.
to inform people, hey, you got 6 months for you all to work it out, because this is the direction. That's part of,
And-
our challenge is getting the word out to ensure a smooth transition.
And that was my challenge, and I think I've spoken with a few of you one-on-one about, have we communicated this to the businesses? And the reality is, no, it's just challenging. What are we communicating?
Yeah.
We would just be communicating the cost is quadrupled, we don't know what we're going to do.
Well, why don't we put the discussion item on the council agenda for the 23rd, and I don't know, we'll be ready to consider anything at that point, but we need to flesh this out, I think, probably with the full council.
At least get some direction from a policy perspective. We can then, work out the details of how that's going to be communicated and, from a bidding perspective, what the next step is. But to Douglas's point, the quicker we can get a policy in place, the better it will be for us to communicate and give these businesses the opportunity to plan for that, if that is the path that we end up taking.
And either, in any policy direction, whether we're doing the compactor and spreading the costs or what have you, Deborah, maybe, give you some time between now and council to kind of work out what would be the optimal plumbing for billing in advance or billing quarterly, monthly, what have you, for the cost pass-throughs. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that either at the council meeting or at a subsequent meeting. Yeah.
We can do that.
All right, so
So we
are we
are-
actually voting on this?
Desiree,
Got a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second?
Yes?
to Douglas's point about the 6 months, remember, 2 months if you change vendors for your cans, so.
Correct.
We got
Your
2 months.
time constraints.
We got time is of the essence. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. The point of the transition, if you're changing vendors, there's about a 2-month period for the.
And this
new
will
cans.
still allow you to do your RFP updates and everything.
Yes, so our plan would be at the end of this week, just put out a revised scope, and that way we have the 2 prices. If we just do condos, we know what it would cost the city if we do, the full scope as we have done. But we'll have, by the 23rd, we should have the actual cost for just condominiums.
Okay. All right. So we're voting basically to make a recommendation to do the 6 months and then included in that, or is it separate that we're going to take this to council? I mean, what?
I think
I don't
you
think we
can-
need the motion
You don't
then.
need to,
No.
you don't need to include it in the motion, but we'll make sure that it's on the agenda for discussion, sort of the overall
We're
policy.
just voting on that second bullet there.
Correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
All right, we have, what do we have next?
Yard debris.
Yard debris.
All right, give me 1 second.
And I've got a great picture from my islands. The good old Forest Trail Islands.
Thank you, Deborah. All right, I'll go back here. You should text Steven. All right, so here's another policy that we would like for the committee to discuss and entertain and at least start the conversation. Not the first time we've had it, but we would like to get that introduced. I've included just a one-pager in the meeting packet to help with the discussion and what we believe to be a problem that we would like to find a solution for at a policy level. As you all know, we currently do not have a set miscellaneous or yard debris collection schedule, and that's, and Donnie, please chime in when you deem necessary. It is done mostly every day, as time permits, in the afternoons. But that's always been a challenge with communication. When somebody moves in, when is my day? We have on the website that it's on Wednesdays. But the reality is we do it every day because of the volume.
That's the ordinances, debris and miscellaneous is Wednesdays. But debris operations are 40 hours a week.
I passed by a chomper on my way here this morning.
So I think
On
that,
34th.
so I think because of that sort of historical policy, we see challenges with the aesthetics of the island by having, debris piles on the public right-of-way almost every day, because people would put it out at any time, and then it would get picked up sometime during that week. And we think that it generates some inconsistencies in the pickup process that we would like to address. So, we see the problem being the high volume of miscellaneous and yard debris that is put out in the public right-of-way for pickup. We talked about this a couple of years ago about requiring contractors to haul off any yard debris that they generate here on the island. That was not, at the time, embraced by full council. But we believe that it is something that is worth discussing again and putting some policy together to address the challenges that creates for the city, the Public Works Department operations, I think fairness across the board, and again, the aesthetics of the island. So in terms of a strategy, we talked about, one of the biggest problem, whether it's the trash generated by a contractor or a homeowner, is the volume. When somebody puts out a ton of yard debris or a ton of miscellaneous out, it just, the time that it takes our public works crews to pick up that it's enormous. And sometimes that's part of the challenge that when we're behind yard debris, when we are behind on miscellaneous, it doesn't yield a good operations overall. And the island does not look, in all terms and purposes, clean all the time. So our proposal is to establish a policy reducing and limiting the amount of miscellaneous and yard debris that can be put out on the right-of-way. Create a consistent schedule for pickup that could be advertised, dividing the island into fifths so that every day, a different section of the island is picked up. Require that miscellaneous or yard debris to be placed in the public right-of-way no earlier than the day before pickup, very similar to garbage collection, where we only allow garbage carts to be placed after 5 p.m. The day before, and have to be collected by the next morning, the morning after the day of collection. And obviously incorporating an implementation strategy that includes communications and changes potentially to the code. Part of the policy would limit the quantity to no more than 2 96-gallon containers, but create an exception for leaf bags up to 10. I think we've talked about that being a sustainable exception. Must be placed in the public right-of-way no earlier than the day before the collection. Any modifications to the schedule would be communicated through Sunny. That's our new AI-powered citizen engagement tool. We're trying to encourage people to sign up as a way to have direct communications with the city. So this would allow us to communicate directly with people depending on where they are on the island. So if we're delayed for whatever reason, we can say, leave it out. It won't, we notify code enforcement. It'll be picked up the following day. So communications, I think, will be much improved if we utilize these tools that are available to us. Miscellaneous, we talk about, sometimes seeing mattresses and appliances and furniture being placed out in the public right-of-way for pickup. We would propose that we require those items to be picked up by a requested special pickup by the Public Works Department. And then the Public Works Department would notify them when to place it out on the public right-of-way, when they would be available to pick up. And then the collection schedules included there based on sort of our historical knowledge of volume and locations. Mondays would be Breach Inlet through 14th Avenue, Tuesdays 15th through 30th, Wednesdays 30th through 42nd, Thursday would be all of Wild Dunes, and then Friday 42nd to 57th Avenue. And this schedule would have Mondays and Fridays being the lighter days in terms of volume. So any delays during the week could be easily accommodated within Mondays and Fridays. And then miscellaneous, so we're talking about chairs, something that is not garbage or yard debris, then that would be picked up island-wide on Wednesdays. So this is just a first stab at our attempt at trying to consolidate, organize, and just improve the operations of yard debris and miscellaneous collection on the island.
So first, I would say that I definitely think this is something that we do need to address because, you see, especially coming up into hurricanes, we have had multiple times where we have huge piles of trash sitting there waiting to be blown around and float around from a hurricane. We have serious problem on Forest Trail of people putting their yard debris where they're not supposed to on the islands. So I think knowing the days of pickup and all of that would be awesome. And I definitely think, when we I was on the committee when we talked about, and I believe Councilman Popson was the one who brought it up in the first place, of having, the contractors haul away their own trash. And, if it's a tree service, they do that. But just I've seen different lawn companies have 15 people out there working and bagging, and they have 100 yard bags, then they just sit and leave there.
That's the number he said. I was like, no way, no way.
I said, no way, 100.
Unbelievable. I don't think they had
gave me the
ever raked
address.
up leaves in their yard ever. But anyway, that's ridiculous amount of, and I know Donnie said back when we talked about this before, that he felt like they could handle it, and I think y'all do a great job, but you're not being helped, and handling it and being able to afford it is also a different matter, because we're paying by volume when we haul this stuff away. So it's costing us money that we don't need to be spending. My only issue is it's one thing to roll your trash and your recycling down the day before. If you, and most people that are gonna be doing their own yard work are gonna be doing it probably on a weekend. If you've ever tried to move a paper leaf bag after it's been sitting in the rain for a couple of days, it's impossible. So I have a problem with making people move that stuff out the morning or the day before. I really don't think I've actually tried, and if it hasn't rained, it's great, you can pick it up and move it. If it's rained, it's not moving.
We did see that as a potential challenge, and, in our minds, we thought, well, would that then encourage people to minimize the amount of yard debris that they put out on the public right-of-way, and addressing the aesthetics piece of it, of having all of that yard debris out on the public right-of-way for many days. So I think that would be the trade-off. Certainly, I'd be interested to hear people's feedback. But that would be.
If we had a schedule and it was being picked up literally every Wednesday in my neighborhood, so you put it out there on Saturday and it's gone on Wednesday. And quite frankly, all of the short-term rentals that go Saturday to Saturday roll out their trash on Saturday and it sits there until it gets picked up. So, that's not really much of a change compared, in an ideal situation, that would be great. And, for some people, they will probably choose to put their trash out. If they know it's going to be picked up, they'll choose to put it out there the day before, just because they don't want it sitting in their own yard. But I think that'd be hard to enforce that. But those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think this looks like a pretty thoughtful framework, and I think your concern, I think, is legitimate. But maybe we give this a try as a framework, and there'd be some discretion if somebody puts their lawn debris out a day or two before. It might not be. Seems like it might be the exception rather than have to codify it. But you all seem like you've thought through this quite a bit. And what do we need to do to make it happen? Is it a ordinance change? Is it updating an ordinance? Is it something that?
It would require changes to the code. I think it would require a transition period so that we can communicate what the new schedule is and what the new parameters are. Ideally, we have this in place before the next season, so we have some wiggle room to implement it. Is there an urgency to it? No, we have a little bit of time to flush out any specific details, like Chair Myers indicated, but it is something that I think would improve dramatically our operations. It would improve people's understanding of just the way that yard debris and miscellaneous works. We get those questions all the time. I know you have. I get that people ask me, when is my collection date? And there's, they'll pick it up.
I think the idea is to go after your pictures kind of thing is really, and the whole major debris issues and the 100 bags and things of that nature. And this kind of encompasses and envelops everything, gives people guidelines on when they're going to get picked up and all. So I think it's a great idea.
And really, the portion of the policy about when people can put it out, all we're trying to do is minimize, again, the clutter on the public right-of-way, and just visually, can look bad. And that may be fine. The community might, be okay with it. So this is just a general framework of what could be in place to improve that, if that is a huge priority importance for the city.
One part we haven't really touched on is, and I know it's important to Donnie, is that, I think from a practical standpoint, if they see a pile, they obviously, it's easier for them to just get the pile than to start calling code enforcement. So, the issue of enforcement is a concern.
Thank you.
And so we have thought about, we'd obviously have to do a campaign of hey, this is how it's going to work. These are the times, these are the dates, this is what you need to do. But I think to adopt a policy like this, we would have to do it knowing that once that kind of campaign is done, the informational kind of rollout, the expectation would be, and we'd need to loop in the police department more than we have. If there's an infraction, the work for the Public Works Department to deal with it as a code enforcement issue takes more time than it does to just pick it up. So we would ask them, just call the code enforcement officers. So there would be there's kind of the ugly side of this would be with any policy, eventually you're going to have to get into kind of changing behaviors and that is kind of looming down the road that it could create enforcement issues that involve code enforcement. That would be unpleasant.
So, and that's to Douglas, in our meeting, Douglas was really focused on volume, and that contributes, it all goes back to the volume. With the major landscaping issues, if you control your volume, then you eliminate that stuff, and that was his pure focus is, let's get the volume right.
Back to when the last time we had this conversation was focused on just contractors and landscapers and requiring those. But really, if a landscaper comes and generates, less than 10 leaf bags or less than 2 gallons worth of yard debris, then, we can manage that. It's really, it's again, like to Donnie's, but it's the volume. But, to expand on what Douglas was saying, I think the example was made, well, what happens at, let's say 7th Avenue, and somebody puts out more volume than what we are required or would be required to collect. At that point, the communication would be made to the owner, you're required to haul that off. The Public Works Department is not going to do that, where right now, we would go out there, pick it up, it's a headache, but we would do it. But there will be a time where that will need to be part of the policy in order to modify behavior.
Another option, and that I dealt with this on another beachfront community recently, is that if you go over that amount, couldn't be our water bill, but they add it to your water bill. So they, if you go out, if they get a certain amount more, then they tell you how many cubic yards it was, and they add it to your water bill and bill you. I don't know if that's an option, obviously not the water bill, but something that if there's a way that we could do that.
I think they have a city could consider charging a fee for special pickups in here.
Yeah.
So,
That
yeah,
would be
so
the scheduled pickup. I mean, we kind of thought through, and obviously Donnie also is not set up for payments, so that would be a challenge, but we could,
Nor will he be.
but we could.
You're the service delivery, right?
We could
Be cash.
Yeah, well, I guess in the one pager, we included that consideration for special pickups, that the city could consider implementing a fee for anything that would, and we were talking about more what we call white goods, appliances,
Right.
furniture, mattresses, that if it's something that can be accommodated at the back of a pickup truck, we could get. But anything over that, then it would require a special pickup. Oh, I'm sorry, it would require a special pickup anyway, but we can attach a fee to that.
Shouldn't we expect, there'll be some transition. I remember getting the stickers on my cans when we were talking about trying to get the cans out of the visibility range and built a.
It would be, we actually
Enclosure.
talked about it would be a very similar
Yeah.
kind of process to that, which did ruffle some feathers.
I got the message.
Yeah. But it's a thing you want to go
Effective, very effective.
eyes wide open that it's a change in policy. And again, from Donnie's standpoint, if the policy says 2 96-gallon cans and it's 4, the path of least resistance for them is to collect all 4, but you collect all 4 that once, next time it's 6, next time it's 8, and then you're kind of back to the beginning. So we would try to be consistent in just not doing it and relaying back to those owners what to do. And I would just like to go back to the beginning of the issue and just say that I think it appears that the word is kind of out that our public works they will just pick up anything, as much as you have from wherever. we think there's kind of a Wild West free-for-all where contractors who probably work elsewhere come here, maybe they have work here, maybe they don't, but they know that they'll get the piles. So they push out an entire truckload of debris, and for his operations to deal with that truckload, that is an entire day. I mean, that's a day dedicated to that one
You're saying we might
pile.
be getting imported debris from other
Yeah.
locations, is what you're telling us? Yeah.
In certain places, yes.
Yeah, we think.
Could
that-
be.
We think the word is out that
That we're the dump.
we are kind of,
Palms dump.
we'll take it all and we'll get it, and that's the challenge of keeping a schedule. You get an entire couple of truckloads in one location, that's it for your entire day. So you obviously can't keep a schedule when the volume is that much.
I would suggest that if there's a named storm, a pending named storm, that you waive all that. Because then you got public safety issues.
Do you want
Well,
it
and
out?
after,
No,
before
no,
and
you
after.
just waive it if there's a pending named storm.
Oh, after.
Or before.
But I guess another problem is people
Yeah. After
they're
there's
tidying up the
tons,
island,
right.
and then everybody starts putting their
No,
stuff
I
out.
understand, but before, there's going to be potentially piles that we got to get rid of because it's a public safety.
Well, we don't, I mean,
We don't like
we don't like, I mean.
No,
it-
I understand, nobody likes it, but it's there, and if, you know, and if you're expecting 100-mile-an-hour winds, you don't want debris out on the road.
Correct. I think that the exception could exist in the, you know, when we translate all this to code changes, to have some exceptions and some leeway after a storm, when people, you know, when it'll take some time to collect everything. But the message we always send before a storm is, hold on to your debris.
Right.
Put it, you know, safely secured.
Sure, but there are always exceptions. For instance, we had a hurricane, I don't remember, Donnie, was 7-8 years ago, and a second homeowner had left a Hobie cat on the beach and had abandoned it. Well, that needs to get taken up because that's a projectile. And Donnie came and got it.
Correct. I
I
would,
do think you've got exceptions in those events that we're going to have.
Definitely after a storm, and maybe to your
even-
point, we
But-
we kind of preface in the beginning of hurricane season, get your light stuff, get your stuff that's gonna need to be
Sure,
removed,
I
get
would,
it
I
going
would just
now.
build in some exceptions so that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's a judgment call.
Yeah, I agree. I also think though that this could end up helping that situation, because if there is a schedule and it is picked up when it, you know, when
Yeah.
it's supposed to, then you don't, I mean, we had, when one of the bigger hurricanes was coming through, I mean, we had piles of trash that had been sitting for weeks. And people were like, oh my God, and what, it was like, people had, it was like wood, you know, it wasn't just leaves. And I was like, oh, great, when this hurricane comes, this is now gonna be, not anymore gonna be in this nice tight little bundle. So I think if we do get some enforcement and a schedule, we won't have those problems as much. But then also back to the communication of, yes, please don't put out. you know,
don't empty your garage
Right,
2 days
like,
before
yeah.
a storm,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
we have seen. And then we're running around, you know, like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to collect all that because we get the calls from the neighbors. Oh my God, that's gonna be a projectile and gonna, you know, break a window. So I would be very concerned and careful about how we word it so that it doesn't give people the perception that we'll have exceptions to the schedule ahead of a storm and people just dumping everything out. Because that's the challenge we have now.
Yeah. But then after a storm also, I think we have to understand that.
Of course.
There's gonna be,
Mountains.
Mhm. Yeah. And at that point, you know, the city 2 years ago
have
entered into,
emergency, right.
we have an emergency contractor that can help supplement our current staff to ensure that we clean up the island as quickly as possible.
One last thing, just reinforce the enforcement once this code's changed, because if a homeowner does not get caught, and we've serviced that day, and then he or she says, well, I put it out, but they didn't get caught, I just don't want the public works, whoever's in my seat, to get the black eye. Because we went through that area, and they put it out, but it was a little too late. And then now it sits, and that's what we're trying to avoid, and so that's why I'm heavy on the enforcement, and, you're gonna have to have some enforcement.
Yeah. So,
Do we want
good?
to, would we want to provide, bring this conversation either, I think it could be at the next workshop in August, just to give a little bit more informal opportunity for council. There's no hard decision, action item yet on this before we hear from the other group. And since we're not having a workshop in July, we can put this up at the August agenda.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, beach garbage collection services.
All right. So the city, as you know, has garbage cans, yellow garbage cans out on the beach and on the street side, all along Front Beach on Ocean Boulevard, and the municipal parking lots. And that collection is serviced by a vendor, and that contract is going to be ending next year. Ahead of that, I wanted to start a conversation with the committee about what that looks like in the future. If there are any changes that we would like to do to our policy in terms of location of garbage cans, frequency of collection, location, anything else? That we would want to
Interrupt you for
incorporate.
just a second. When you said ends next year, does it end before the next season starts, or does it go through
Ends-
all next season?
Ends in September of next year. As you all know, the vendor, the operator of that contract passed away tragically earlier this year. That contract is still on, it's being fulfilled by his son currently. We have asked them to let us know what their plans are for the remainder of the contract term and in the future as well. Because the current contract does not, we've already exercised the extension option in 2020 through 2025. It's a service that if we want to continue to provide, we'd have to bid out and put out for bid, which gives us the flexibility and the opportunity to add to the scope of services. One thing that we have talked about internally is including the collection of miscellaneous debris from the beach. As you know, for whatever reason, people leave tents and beach chairs on the beach all the time, and that is currently collected by our public works crews. During the summer, we've come up with a schedule of collection twice a week. One day during the week and one day during the weekend. But that would be something that we would want to pass on to a contractor who is already on the beach and would have the ability to collect as well. So just foreshadowing that this is going to come up next year. I want to get ahead of it so that we can properly communicate what our plan is, put a good request for bids out. In addition to that, we also have talked internally about the policy that the city has had for a long time of having garbage cans out on the beach. Currently, they don't have any lids on. And one of the things that we have consistently heard about is, are we contributing to the garbage problem on the beach? Because garbage that's thrown in those yellow cans can be blown off by the wind. The other challenge with not having lids, as we've heard this year with the coyote population, it became very apparent that some of these coyotes were using that as a source of food, which is a challenge and something that you're trying to get a hold of before when your coyote population is kind of a little out of control. So we would want to think about changing the barrels to ones that have lids. That would change the collection operation altogether, but it is doable. Another question is, do we want to continue to have those garbage cans out on the beach, or do we want to move them out onto the beach, into the street side of each beach access path in a corral of some sort with lids that would be, it would be easier for collection. The collection on the beach is challenging because it's tide dependent, and that would require a contractor to sometimes collect garbage on the beach 2 a.m., 3 a.m., whenever it's low tide. So access is always a challenge. There's a lot of considerations with this, and one that I would like for the Environmental Advisory Committee to maybe look at and spend some time if there is a desire or a need to change the policy. So just, I wanted to bring this up just for awareness that this contract is ending next year, and it, again, gives us an opportunity to reevaluate some changes if we feel like those are necessary.
If we were to move the receptacles, and what I'd like to know too is how many did we have, 5, 6, 7 years ago versus how many now? I know just on the beach accesses I go on to have for the last, 10 years or so, the number of receptacles are growing. So it's more,
got a
go
guess.
ahead, Donnie, maybe you can.
I think he has a guess
Well,
on it.
I mean, I use the analogy with these, in our discussions, it started with 57 on 7 miles of beach, one at each beach path. And now we're at 157 or 200, or 250.
We have 3 now just on our
Yes,
access.
and that's just because of the need. And now you see at certain beach paths, and I've got photos, with 5 cans with probably 3 other cans on the beach sand right beside it, just overflow. Now that was
Yeah.
during some holiday or pre-holiday weekends, but you got to look at it from a worst case scenario.
The peak, not the valley, yeah.
Yep, and you got to prepare for what's your worst case and get those cans out there. I think with the number of cans out there now, aesthetics are starting to play a key
Yeah.
just with the yellow barrels, just my opinion.
And we know the yellow barrels are iconic. There's a lot of history behind them, so we want to be sensitive to that, but at the same time, not ignore just the reality of the challenge that they have just in collection, not having lids, not being able to contain as much. They're limited. I mean, they're what, 40, 50 gallon?
Yeah, they're not, they don't hold near as much as the 96-gallon toter.
So if those, on a, hypothetical, if those were all to come off the beach and go somewhere in an enclosure, what would we do about that? I mean, would we need the contract for the beach pickup for the other debris, or it would just be reduced significantly, or would they pick it up at the beach access instead of on the beach?
Well, certainly you would have to have a dedicated vendor or operator to service the containers for those beachgoers, which is right now, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That's when you're going to generate all your garbage. So right now, that's the contract, 5 days a week. I think even with 96-gallon toters and corrals, you're going to still have to have a dedicated person, operator, whether it's Public Works or a vendor outside.
Resources, for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I just didn't want that to fall all, if it moved it, it wouldn't fall all
there-
on
So I
you.
would say that by moving them to the street, the benefit to that, whether it's the Public Works or a vendor, the frequency would be different than our, the regular garbage collection. Like Donnie said, we're right now 5 days a week, frankly, 7 days during the summer, because we just ask for additional pickups during the season. But it would give us a redundancy. So if something that were to happen, then we would need somebody to pull those cans off of, away from the corrals. But they could, in an emergency situation, they could be picked up by Public Works. There would be a redundancy built into that. Well, right now, our Public Works department can pick them up from the beach, but it's a much inefficient and slow process. The corrals can also be considered to be placed on the beach. There are beaches that have corrals with lid, garbage containers with lids, so it's possible too, if we believe it's important to have those resources out on the beach versus the street side, that can be done. I think the challenges with that is just the collection and the tides and frankly, when storms come, we're scrambling to pull them off of the beach, secure them, empty them. So there's just pros and cons to that approach as well.
What if we did something along the lines of having them on the beach at Front Beach and then off? Because I'm just thinking as a practical matter, like if you decided to take them off the beach at 12th, 13th, like where are you gonna put them?
Yeah, there'd be a lot more beach sweeps to
Right,
pick it up.
and
yeah.
then, and just having the trash on the beach, whereas, once you get up, past 21st, going up and then down, 8th and down, if you had them off the beach, there's space off the beach. And then also, you're not as congested. I feel like, and that would make it so that you only had to go on the beach for 10 blocks or whatever.
Where the density is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I kind of feel like that might kind of fix the problem in both ways without creating another problem.
Yeah, we did talk about sort of a hybrid approach depending on just volume. What we would like to do just as a test is pick an avenue down Palm Boulevard, build a corral, put some containers there, and just monitor that for a few months, just to see, do we see more trash on the beach, or do people really buy into this pack in, pack out mentality and, and dispose of the trash on the street side? One
Put
thing.
signage there too to.
Yeah,
Correct, yeah.
Another thing,
I like that.
back to me and my recycling. I know that I guess I did not know before today that the yellow cans were near and dear to people's hearts. But it's confusing because people are used to seeing blue for recycling and brown for trash. And we have yellow and it's like, oh, it's both, or whatever.
Well, we used to have blue cans out there as well.
We did. I thought so, too.
We did. The challenge is that people
Don't,
do not recycle,
Right.
and we've found ourselves just, they were so mixed that,
didn't make sense.
it didn't make sense, so it was all going to the landfill. So the reality is people are not recycling, and it created a false sense of security that they were throwing something out in the blue can.
Right.
It was going to the landfill anyway, just
Yeah.
because.
so I think it's probably not worth, but I do think, because I know the environmental committee has talked about this, of the people leaving stuff, and I think a lot of people think that they're paying it forward, I'm gonna leave this half-broken chair, and I'm sure someone's gonna love sitting in it, but if we had a corral and a sign on it that said, don't leave anything
Yeah.
outside of the trash can, it flows off into the ocean or whatever, I just think there's always going to be people that are going to do that, but
Yeah.
in some cases, people might be doing it out of not really understanding that it ends up being trash anyway, so.
So the recycling on the beach, that was a pilot program that was started in Charleston County, serviced the dumpster from the vendor. It was an isolated, but the contamination was so that the county refused collecting it. And so then the vendor, he was trying to do recycling runs and it's getting contaminated. County's not servicing it. And under that contract, the vendor pays for the service of those white dumpsters that you see, not the city. And so he was having to pay for the recycling that was contaminated. That was how that transpired.
To get rid of the recycling.
Yeah, I think they're just all being used for garbage now, pretty
Correct.
much. Yeah,
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
I think on 9th, we've got one yellow receptacle at the entrance, and then we've got 2 yellow and 1 blue at the beach side. So we've got 4 total there, I think, now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of
Weird.
trying out having a pilot.
Can you just do that? You don't need anything from us to
Corral.
just go do it?
Yeah, we can do that. We'll inform council as part of this discussion. And we would like to have the Environmental Advisory Committee to maybe look at this policy of where we have trash cans, so we want to have a hybrid approach, the pros and cons of doing that. It's interesting, we see the amount of volume of trash that is generated on our beach, and I've always wondered, how the heck do other communities that don't offer garbage cans on the beach do it? Are they just dealing with all this trash being left on the, in the dry sand, and people just walk up and leave? I mean, that happens today, even when we're providing in some areas.
When there's a trash can.
When there's a trash can, very visible, at every beach access path. And what I've found so far is people say, busy weeks like July the 4th, we'll probably see more trash on the beach, but generally, you know, the psychology is you don't see, you're bringing it with you. Whether that would be true for us, I don't know, and that's, I think, what, you know, having an area that is not on Front Beach, but highly used, to see how that would operate and how people behave around that change. It's interesting to us, but there's just a mix across the board. People who, you know, have it on the beach, have it off the beach, and anywhere in between, so.
Yeah, I think we feel a little bit like there's kind of a unicorn contractor that is, first of all, it's a very unique machine that they use. It requires constant, 7 days a week, running it, attention. And it's all day. So it is, we don't know that there's going to be a lot of vendors kind of vying for that work because it's such a unique arrangement. So that was the other part of it, can we get just a more typical collection routine that's, there are a lot of operations set up to just empty regular garbage cans from the road, going out on the beach, dealing with tides, dealing with all of that. It's really narrows the pool of who can do that work down to, we don't know of many.
A lot of beaches don't have, they just don't have them out there.
Just, it's very complex. I mean, to get somebody to be willing to do it requires a lot of hand holding, a lot of complexity, and there's a lot to go wrong. I mean, you get a break in service and really kind of all hell breaks loose when it doesn't get that just constant routine work. It's very, very apparent.
The other issue is if you're gonna build some sort of corral, and then the hurricanes, or even just a high tide comes and takes it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why most beaches don't
Do that.
have them on
Do
the beach.
beachside corral.
And that's, one of the beaches I've gone to, they have like a post and the cans are attached to the post
You had a
up
photo of that.
pretty high off the ground,
Post,
so that it doesn't wash away in the high tide.
right.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the middle section of the island is a very healthy area now, that
Right,
would be
so
an
it got
area that
bigger.
could accommodate that, but, on either end, I think that would be challenging. We know
Yeah.
how dynamic that is. Yeah,
Yeah, I
there's
mean-
just a lot of things, again, like you said, that could go wrong, that
Trash.
just make it,
Trash is a lot of.
So you're going to try your trial, get to the environmental committee, come back with a recommendation or something?
Yes, sir.
Sounds good. All right.
A lot of trash talk today.
Lots of trash talking. Last but not least, discussion on island-wide beach monitoring and surveying.
All right, so we do that every year. The last time we entered into a contract was in thank you, Donnie, 2019, 2020 for 5 years, 2019 for 5 years, so that contract ended this year. We have the ability to issue another request for bids for contractors, engineering firms to provide proposals to us to do the ongoing monitoring. One of the things that's been talked about, the Beach Preservation Ad Hoc Committee, is to increase the frequency of monitoring and surveying of the inlets, the areas that are more dynamic. So that could be built into what we request. In the past, we've done it as a sole source contract with CSC, who has been the city's beach engineer for many, many years. That the code, the procurement code would allow us to do that if that is the will of council, or do it like we did a few years ago when it was bid out. Ultimately was selected CSC just because of their knowledge and history with the city. But those sort of two different paths that we can take. I would like to get some direction quick so that we can get a contract in place this year for the 2024 report and surveying to be done early next year.
I guess my preference would be, I think CSC is doing a good job for us and all, but I think in anything like this, if it's a 5-year contract, and I think we're rolling about $60,000 a year, and we're talking about augmenting the scope, so, we don't know what that'll end up being, but that is over a $300,000 commitment. could be, much higher depending upon what we provide for services and with current rates. I would suggest that just for procurement practices, we put it out for bid, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that makes sense. Can't hurt.
That's right.
I mean, we might as well see what's out there.
Yep, so we'll do that in the next week or two, and if we have bids back before the end of the month, is that something that you'd like to consider bringing before council for discussion at that point? Again, I would like to get that, I wouldn't want to lag on for a couple months.
We should do it as soon
Well,
as-
yeah, I think soon as possible, but I don't know how anybody, I mean, if you're going to prepare the RFP and send it out, and if we're talking, today's the 9th, that
Yeah, we
would be,
typically put it out for 2 weeks.
that'd be 2 weeks from today, if you let it out today. I mean, I don't know what the harm would be if we went one a little bit longer than that, and maybe,
Maybe the goal of having a contract execute, or a contract awarded in August.
yeah, I think that would be
That
more
seems more-
realistic and
Okay.
and kind of a
I think we've
level field.
historically, haven't we historically done the survey in August? So to
Yeah.
be-
So maybe a 1-month delay.
Yeah, and we can, the other thing is you might have results for the workshop or something that we could consider, take a look at.
Okay,
Cool.
all right.
All right, having, next month, I'm out of town on the 6th.
I'm flexible.
Can we, does anybody care if we do the 13th instead?
Let me, the only thing to consider is, so that would be the day of the workshop. So if, for example, we bring these bids back to the committee for discussion and maybe a recommendation, it would be the same day as the workshop, which is doable. We can have a placeholder in the workshop agenda anticipating a recommendation from the committee the same day. We'd still be able to discuss it, but just, that would be the only downside. I don't think it's insurmountable.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I
Is
do.
that fine?
Yeah. August 13th.
Are we going to have the workshop in August?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
July.
Not in July.
not in July. I haven't heard, yeah,
I was just,
no.
yeah. Was,
Same time, 9 a.m.?
yeah. Is
Okay.
that good?
Yeah.
Good.
Motion to adjourn?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Off the record.